Welcome back to Women Rabbis Talk online about the books we're reading. How are you, Marcy?
I am fine, thank you. How are you?
I'm good. I'm Rabbi Emma Gottlieb, and you are.
Oh, I'm Rabbi Marcy Bellows.
Okay, and now that we've done that, we are hoping to come through the end of the introduction that we've been reading to Living the Letters by Rabbi Michael Marmer. And we've really been enjoying the deep content. And we've last time we started finally learning about the letters side, and it was really interesting. And we're gonna pick up where we left off.
Yes, we are. I'm going to share my screen for all the folks at home.
Was there anything that stuck out for you about what we read last time, or that you wanted to review before we jump in to this week's reading?
I just like the way that these letters that you learn. I loved the point that you learn them as one of the very first things in your life, but then
Yeah.
they also can unlock the key to like existence. So
Yeah.
they're seemingly so simple, and then also using them, you can kind of discover the mysteries of the universe and deeper ethics and values and ideas and you know poetry. I mean, like that they're used so in so many ways and are not
Mm.
simple at all.
Yeah. Yeah, I loved that too, and the way that these sort of simple symbols that we learn when we're young and that we build a relationship with as children sort of follow us into our adult lives and our academic lives,
Mhm.
and just become richer and more meaningful um, as as we grow deeper awareness of what they can offer us.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. As a tool, they unlock so much for us.
As a tool, as symbols,
Hmm.
as yeah, keys to deeper meaning. Okay.
Hmm. All right.
So we are picking up at this section called Alphabet and Revelation. And would you like to read first?
Sure. So, Alphabet and Revelation. In a 1726 essay, Daniel Defoe advanced the theory that the origin of the alphabet was the divine revelation of writing to Moses on Sinai. Ooh. The historical assumptions that informed Defoe's idea have not stood the test of time. Today's scholarship demonstrates that writing systems of different kinds appeared in different places around the ancient world, some of them many centuries earlier than the 13th century BCE.
So
Hmm.
writing predates Moses if we follow the general academic dating of the Exodus.
Yeah, approximately 3,500 years ago. Yeah. Um, right. So writing is even older.
Writing is even older than Torah.
Yeah. Um,
Okay.
which I guess, I mean, that makes plenty of sense. We've seen forms of writing that are much earlier than any kind of ancient Hebrew.
Yeah, and we also understand that originally Torah was passed orally.
Mm-hmm.
That it wasn't necessarily a fully written document. I mean, we have the imagery of the tablets, so something was written, but certainly the bulk of Torah wouldn't have fit
Yes.
on two tablets. And so at least part of it was passed orally in the beginning. So yeah, interesting to think about the ways in which those two histories and narratives overlap.
Mm-hmm. And what changed in the text when it was finally written down, and what are the different streams and threads that were woven together from different traditions. And so the writing was very significant of the
Mm.
Torah, but it isn't the foundation of writing. It isn't the origin.
Right. It isn't the origin of writing.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really interesting. And so, I mean, this is going to take us on like a tiny little tangent, so we don't have to get too far into it. But it's hard for me not to think about sort of the pros and cons of what happens to a text once it's written down.
Mm-hmm.
That there's so many ways in which the printing press like revolutionized things, and it made it possible to put learning and text into the hands of people who otherwise wouldn't be able to access it, and all of that is like wonderful and a huge part of how learning has evolved over
Right.
time. But also, like, once a text is written down, it's it's locked in, especially
Yeah.
once it's sort of like printed and copyright and all that stuff. It's locked in. It becomes inflexible in a
Hmm.
way that oral texts are not,
Hmm.
and and it sort of loses some of that adaptability or flexibility. Um,
Yeah.
and it's interesting to think about that and to think about the ways in which the letters that we are going to be talking about are in some ways like fixed in certain ways. Like they
Hmm.
come in an order, they correspond to numbers that come in an order, and we like understand them in certain ways that are not changeable.
Right.
And then also there's ways in which they change in the different ways that we use them.
Right.
So it's, yeah, just playing around with all of that in my brain as
Yeah.
we're
I like that a lot. And then I have a yes and. Um, it's interesting to think about how we read Torah and how we interpret Torah. And
right.
maybe that, a hint of where that came from is when it was an oral tradition. And we had the flexibility at that time. And maybe we're regaining or reclaiming
Mhm.
that flexibility of a set text with the Pardes approach, for instance, the different ways we interpret text and keep it alive.
Yeah, those different levels and layers of interpretation yeah, and also like the ways that when we look in the text of a Torah scroll, that sometimes it is the letters themselves that cue us to something deeper going on, that there
Absolutely.
would be a letter that is bigger than all the other letters or smaller than all the other letters, or that has a fancy crown that's different than the other letters, or that's misplaced or seems to be misplaced or that's
Mhm.
absent, right? And sometimes those tiny little letter related details are how we know that there is something deeper that we should be looking for in the text.
Mhm. Yeah, I love those typographical little mysteries throughout the text.
Yeah.
And it's so fun to play with them and interpret them and wonder when they started, which sofer, which scribe of the Torah um, maybe made that determination. Like, I'm going to make this aleph much smaller.
Right. Or was it the Masoretes as a group who are part of the group that we credit with sort of the the the
Like the
um
finalizing, right?
the
Kind of.
finalizing and the
Yeah.
trope and things like that, the
Yeah.
Masoretic text, was it them as a group, do those things um collectively get attributed to them as a group? Did they inherit some of them or some of them
Mm-hmm.
later? Like, yeah, it's really interesting, right?
Mm-hmm. All right. Shall we
Okay.
continue?
Yes, please.
Okay. While I am not advancing the belief that God's hand revealed the mysteries of writing to Moses on Sinai, I am intrigued by a more modest yet highly suggestive possibility. At least one version of the story of how the West Semitic alphabet came into existence speaks of Canaanite slaves in the Sinai desert proposing a simplification of Egyptian writing systems through the use of Semitic words. Aleph as bull, bet as house, like bait or bait, and so on. Semites returning from the Sinai Peninsula between perhaps 1850 and 1300 BCE, with a revelatory technology capable of opening up entire new worlds of possibility, constitutes an intriguing reading of the Sinai theophany. In the words of a modern author, perhaps the transforming event that transpired so long ago at the foot of Mount Sinai was the invention of the alphabet.
Hmm. So, um, so there is still this sort of desire to link the evolution of the alphabet, if not the beginning of written language, but
Right.
the evolution of our alphabet
Mm-hmm.
um, to be in parallel with the revelation of Torah.
Yeah. Yeah. That's so fascinating. I love that idea. I don't remember ever hearing that before.
It certainly makes sense in terms of the other ways that we understand historically this group of Canaanite slaves, forming a new kind of identity after they leave Egypt and sort of coming together in different ways,
Mhm.
bringing together different backgrounds and different mythologies. And it makes sense. They're also like that they're trying to solidify a collective identity for themselves. And that part of that could have been wanting to solidify a language that was their language, that was
Yes.
not Egyptian and not anybody else's language, but that, was built on what they already knew.
Right. It's such a big part of identity for a group of people. Absolutely.
Sorry, one moment, please.
Hello to the puppies.
Blue would love to have some language. She has a lot to say and she has no words to say it with. She doesn't know letters, she only knows barks.
Only barks. All right, so we'll go on. Some cultural theorists have argued that the alphabet as engine of Western culture is on the wane, due in no small measure to the new possibilities offered by rapid technological change. They look beyond the alphabet to a new day. This claim is not only based on a reading of current digital trends, but also on an ambition to overthrow notions of rationality deeply embedded in alphabetic literacy. Is he talking about like emojis and things like that? Changing written language?
Maybe I'm reading it again to myself. Uh, is
We
on the
use
way.
less and less
Yes,
letters.
we use less and less, like with texting. I don't know if it's, I guess, partly emojis and partly like the way that we shorten, what are you up to? Right? Are you, right? When we're texting,
Yeah.
that we sometimes replace words with letters and we shorten things and,
Yep.
that we see younger generations um, using or dropping, like using grammar differently or dropping it altogether.
Yeah.
Um, so I think that's what he's talking about.
Yeah. Okay. So like LOL, WTF. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
have no such ambition. The hyper literal character of Jewish culture is unlikely to disappear, although the balance between literacy and orality may well change significantly in response to monumental changes in technology and communication. Rather than see in the centrality of the alphabet evidence of hierarchical thinking, Jose Farr argued that Hebrew thought is informed by horizontal dialectics, insisting that the alphabetic mind recognizes the other as free and equal. His
Mm.
suggestion, polemical to be sure, is that the use of a small range of symbols denoting core elements promotes a broad horizon of imagination. Might we imagine Moses in the desert, struck by the infinite creative possibilities of this most elemental of human techniques? Huh.
Hmm. Okay. Interesting. I don't think this is exactly what he was talking about, but as you were reading that,
Mm-hmm.
I when it was talking about hierarchy,
Mm-hmm.
one of the things that sort of bubbled up in my brain was like, oh, it's interesting that there isn't a hierarchy with letters, right? That like the letters are equal,
Mm-hmm.
right? Um,
That's
there
true.
might be some that we use more than others, or different ways that we might group them, consonants and vowels, or in the English alphabet anyway, or silent letters and vocalized letters, or things like that. But like, there isn't a hierarchy. There's not like a letter that's better than all the other letters.
Right.
At least not in the way that we use them linguistically. Maybe when we start to look at their symbolic and spiritual meanings, we may discover some kind of hierarchy. But it's interesting that there is an equality in the alphabet that is sort of rare in human systems.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, great way to put it. Um, yeah, I love this image of Moses at the end of the paragraph. It feels like looking up at the stars in the sky and feeling so overwhelmed by the number of stars. If he looked at these 22 Hebrew letters or 26 English letters, let's imagine, and just realizing all that they could convey, and it is
Yeah.
infinite. um, so
Yeah,
wow.
and there's so much about sort of what happens with Moses and the Israelites in this period between Egypt and the Promised Land, where they're really trying to figure out a way of life that is like realistic and um, implementable,
Mm,
and like and it also sort of makes sense to me that they might have felt like the Egyptian language that they were coming from,
right.
like it was too much. Wasn't gonna be able to be carried by them, and to find a way to sort of distill language into a more digestible, easier to remember, easier to apply alphabet is really
Yeah.
interesting, and sort of in keeping with these other kinds of innovations that we're seeing, um, the kinds of things that they're moving away
Hmm.
from the other peoples of that time and place.
Right.
Um, it feels like it fits to me.
Yeah. And I contrast Hebrew and English to a language like Chinese,
Right.
where there are just so many characters and symbols to learn. And I know that Chinese has gone through a similar change where they've really narrowed down, in certain
Mhm.
places or by certain people, the letters or the symbols that can be used. I think I'm correct in that. Correct. Please feel free to correct me if I'm wrong.
I
Uh,
think I'm not an expert at all in it, but I do remember learning that there was sort of like a simplified version
yeah,
and a complex version. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So it's interesting to have so few symbols that can be combined in so many ways.
Yeah, well, and it's also interesting to think about, what part of what he was saying about sort of the distillation of how we use alphabet in our digital communications, right? It would be interesting to learn like how is that affecting a language like Chinese or Japanese, like
Mm,
have they, I feel like they must have had to also like adapt those languages to a digital, system that is somewhat distilled from, that you would lose some of those like nuances of the written language
hmm.
in a digital form.
Yeah,
um, and it would be interesting to talk to an Israeli about, how that translates. What are the ways in which the Hebrew alphabet is changing in the digital age, or has changed in the digital age, and the
yeah.
ways that, when people are texting and writing in Hebrew, like what, how is that? What does that look like, or how is that experienced compared
Hmm.
to what we see happening in the English language?
Definitely.
Yeah. Okay.
Cool.
Back to
Okay, I'll
theology.
do one more and then you can take the next
Yeah, do
section.
it.
A theology of revelation is being sketched here. The great revelation to the people Israel, distinct in its particular manifestation but not exclusive, is of the potentialities, intellectual, ethical, sacred, and creative, inherent in literacy. Torah is an unfolding process of bringing life to the letters. It is in that process that the human and the divine realms meet.
I
Nice.
like that.
Great way
I
to
like
sum that
this
up.
this idea of, that the letters are just letters until we start to use them in a particular way, and it's in the way that we use them, or in the way that they are used, that sort of brings them to life.
Yeah, and this idea that it's where we can meet the divine. I mean, we really do
Mm.
believe that in our actions, the way we always are reading Torah, the way we're always studying Torah. Actually, the reading itself of Torah out loud is considered a mitzvah. And
Yep.
um, interpreting it is another. Discussing it with people.
Right. And there's that teaching about, anytime the text is studied in Chevruta, right? There's actually three partners. There's you and your Chevruta and God.
Yep. So, hi, God.
Hi, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for signing on. All right, take it
Please,
away.
please like, rate, and review. Okay, Judaism as a living script. Moses Mendelssohn, arguably the first modern Jewish thinker, was fascinated by the historical origins and religious significance of the alphabet and other writing systems. In the second part of his 1783 work, Jerusalem, Mendelssohn constructs an ingenious yet opaque argument concerning hieroglyphics, the alphabet, idolatry, and the ceremonial law. That's a lot of things to
That's a
bring together.
lot.
The claim seems to be based on the rabbinic distinction between the written and oral law. Here we go. He notes that only with reluctance was the oral law ever written down, and that the ceremonial law is essentially oral. The ceremonial law itself, this is the quote from Mendelssohn, the ceremonial law itself is a kind of living script, rousing the heart and mind, full of meaning, never ceasing to inspire contemplation and to provide the occasion and opportunity for oral instruction.
Was he talking
So
about like ritual there?
the ceremonial law,
Yeah.
um, yeah,
Like the
I,
living
I think it,
actions.
I
Yeah.
think it's yeah, like I think it's probably like what we would call halacha, like
Oh, halakha, sure.
the laws, the laws that dictate our actions, like the part of Torah that is law as opposed to narrative.
Hmm.
But I'm not
Yeah, because
sure.
sure. I mean, how do we teach how to light the candles, right? We have to live it. We have to demonstrate it.
Right.
And we have to talk about it.
Yeah. So yeah. So maybe a ritual law, as opposed to all of halacha. I'm not sure. It's yeah. It would be interesting to get clarity on what they mean by ceremonial law.
Hmm.
But it's interesting because I think he's saying something similar to what I was saying before about the pros and cons of writing something down
Yes.
and this um, sort of awareness and commitment to what does he say, to provide the occasion and opportunity for oral instruction, that even though it's a written text, part of how we keep the oral tradition of it and the sort of flexibility and interpretation part of it alive is by
Hmm.
teaching it orally,
Yes.
right? And the part of the, that again, like that whole idea of that the Jewish way that we learn is in Chevruta,
Yeah.
and that we're not supposed to try to learn by ourselves. You need a teacher and you need a study partner, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
In Pirkei Avot, we're taught that, um, and it seems like that's part of what he's talking about here.
Nice. Yeah.
Okay. Written words are, he claimed, Mendelssohn claims, rigid forms into which we cannot force our concepts without disfiguring them. Interesting. It is the performance of distinctively Jewish acts that is bound to provoke the purest form of instruction, whereby the ethical heft and contemporary resonances of the tradition are imparted to the younger generation. Through the performance of ritual acts mandated by tradition, he argues, the circumstances are created which allow for instruction and explanation. Such justifications will certainly change over time. By employing the living text of the ritual commandments, underlying values can be inculcated, and the possibility of finding new and relevant explanations is maintained.
Yes. You know what that reminds me of? Um, all the different reasons for why we break a glass at a wedding.
Oh,
You know, that like there are so many different interpretations of the why, and they reflect different values over time. You
yeah,
know, like I don't talk about, for instance, at my weddings, the destruction of the temple in Jerusalem as one of the justifications for it. That's not meaningful to my couples. But I give others, like, you know, simple material things can break, but let it be the worst brokenness ever to happen to you, you
right.
know.
And if your couples only were given a written guide that said, at the end of the wedding, break a glass,
Yeah.
there would be so much lost in terms of the meaning of it. But by
Yes.
having the opportunity to um, study and learn about it with a rabbi or a teacher, right? Then we're opened up to all of the different, the less, not such a rigid law, but
Mm-hmm.
one that comes with all these different layers of meaning, and when we teach our couples the different meanings, we're also teaching them about Jewish history. We're teaching them about different Jewish denominations and the way that
Yeah.
they do things differently, right? It's such a window into so much other deeper learning, all of which would be lost if we were locked into this, what he says, this like rigidity,
Yes.
that actually, if that's all we inherit, it, I love that, like that he said, it disfigures.
Mm-hmm.
It's not just that we've sort of lost the opportunity, but actually the original intention is disfigured by the rigidity.
Yeah. Yeah. Love it.
Mendelssohn's notion of Judaism's living script has been the subject of significant scholarly inquiry since the 1990s. The steady rise of interest in questions of language, ritual, meaning, and chosenness has brought readers back to what was previously dismissed as little more than a curious digression. So he's sort of pointing at this sort of Jewish Renaissance in the sort of reform and liberal Jewish world that's taken place in the later decades of the 20th century and into the early 21st century.
Mm-hmm.
I love how when he talks about the 1990s, it sounds like it was so long ago. And then
So long ago. It was only 10 years ago.
I feel so old. Okay. It was definitely more than 10 years ago, Marcy.
I know, but I still feel like it was only 10 years ago, not 30 years ago.
Oh my God.
Oh my God.
All right. On that queasy note, I will continue. Mendelssohn's interest in aspects of language is at the nexus of his Jewish and general philosophical concerns. In Jerusalem, Mendelssohn presents a theory of the historical development of the alphabets, which owes much to the contemporary research into what would have been called today anthropology and linguistics. He argues that before alphabets, there were hieroglyphic systems, and before them, pictorial representations from nature, often animals. These pre-alphabetic systems suffered from a propensity to confuse the symbol with the object represented. So like if you think about like the aleph and the bull, that like in these very early usages, it might not have been clear whether the picture of the bull was meant to be a bull or was meant to be an aleph.
Right, sure.
Right. Okay. The next phase of the development of writing systems represents a leap. And the leap, this is a quote, seems to have required more than ordinary human powers. Ooh, some divine intervention here. The use of a limited number of symbols rooted in the hieroglyphic system as they were constitute, in Mendelssohn's view, one of the most glorious discoveries of the human spirit. One sees at any rate how men may have been led step by step without any flight of inventiveness to think of the immeasurable as measurable. There might have been women involved in this too. We don't know.
Might have.
Sorry, Mendelssohn, to call you out on your patriarchy. So there's this. He's talking about a shift from sort of just describing nature and sort of what is seen and tangible with these like pictorial images to language that also is starting to try to describe more than that.
Right.
Like
right,
that.
To try to convey big ideas, not just a bull, but big philosophical ideas, perhaps.
Well, and like, how do you depict emotion? How do you depict relationship? How do you, right? So, so that there's sort of, as we're coming out of a sort of prehistoric type of life as humans or pre-humans, we start to want to communicate bigger things, and these pictorial images are no longer sufficient for doing that.
Exactly.
Right. They're not just saying like ox there, like bull there, go hunt, get fire, right? Like
But it's
there's
more like
more happening.
what is death? What is
Right.
life? What is the
Yeah.
sky?
Yeah. And how
Um,
do they depict God and how do they
yeah.
depict?
It reminds me. Um, my sister and I, my sister of blessed memory, would, when we were little, play 20 questions a lot. And at some point it got a little boring. So we decided to start doing 20 questions of like concepts. And it was
Ooh,
so hard. I
right.
remember distinctly giving her melancholy as one of them. And like, of course, she never got it, because how are you supposed to use 20 questions to get to
Right.
melancholy?
No, no, that's very difficult.
Yes.
Ooh, what a
Yeah, it was
game.
very fun.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you know Toaster Toaster?
No.
Okay. One day remind me to teach you Toaster Toaster.
Okay.
It was taught to me by my other rabbinic bestie, Rabbi Tamar Grimm.
Oh, awesome.
It's a good one. It's a great evolution from 20 questions.
Ooh.
Okay. All right. So, picking up where we left off. Mendelssohn's account of the transition from the hieroglyphic to the alphabetic is intriguing yet difficult to understand. He links it to an analysis of idolatry and mythology, since images of animals and the like were thought to be not symbols, but the things themselves. Hieroglyphics, I have a hard time saying that out loud.
Mm.
Hieroglyphic script offered a stylized version of these images, which should have uh, militated,
Yeah.
yep, against the slide into idolatry, but instead spawned superstition, inventions, and fables. Even the attempt to sidestep this risk by focusing on numbers did not prove effective. Here, too, people began to seek secret power in the numbers themselves. Mendelssohn is describing a constant tension between the undoubted benefits of graphic notation and the inherent risk of idolatry. So it's this other sort of pros and cons of writing something down is that as soon as you put an idea into symbolic representation,
Mm-hmm.
you can manipulate it or you can start to interpret it in different ways. Um, and and you might even start to um, like misunderstand, like if they're using animal imagery to talk about big ideas, big God ideas, right?
Mm-hmm.
Then that
Mm-hmm.
could lead you into thinking that animals are God,
Yeah.
right? So it's
and and I think there's also, I mean, it sounds like he's talking about gematria here,
mhm.
like finding these secret messages in the numbers or in the numerical equivalents of the words. And it reminds me of the one experience I had with the Kabbalah Center,
Mm,
like Madonna Kabbalah Center, when the quote unquote rabbis up at the front on the bima lifted up the Torah like a Hagbah, like lifting it up so people could see the text, but people raised their hands up to like absorb the power of the letters. And they
right,
believed that just by looking at the letters and taking them in, it didn't matter what they meant, that there was
right,
power just in the letters themselves. And I thought that that was completely bizarre. Um,
right, right. Or that like it's a nice idea if it's not isolated. Like if you also are learning the text and understanding the tradition, and then on top of that, you feel like there's energy that can be transferred by being in the presence of the letters. Like that feels okay to me. But if it's like offered as a replacement for actually learning,
yeah.
then that feels very uncomfortable to me. And I think it's also what I was thinking about when he was talking about the numbers and the ways that they lead to idolatry, um, or misinterpretation is sort of the ways in which like the all the Bible code stuff and the ways
Yeah.
in which people take the Torah and they start to play games with the numbers and then suddenly they can predict the apocalypse and when it's going to happen and all these kinds of things and um it's sort of I think when I was young and I was younger and first sort of being exposed to the fact that people do this with the Bible, um, I remember somebody saying to me, like, you know, you can take any text, and if you play around with it enough, you can come up with this kind of stuff, right? And it
Sure.
like, you can do it with Harry Potter, you can do it with, anything. If that's what you're trying to look for, if that's the way that you're trying to use letters and numbers, um, and I think part of what Mendelssohn's talking about is that the way in which that can be a really slippery slope, like
Sure, sure.
where we sort of slide from playful gematria or gematria in the service of interpretation,
Right, right. Like
um,
Midrashic. Yeah.
right, into employing, or mixing and matching, or mathing our way, trying to math our way into sort of darker,
Mm,
um, or more mysterious levels of learning. And I guess maybe part of what we might end up talking about when we start to learn about the Kabbalistic uses of the letters, and
yeah,
certainly
yeah.
like some of what um, came up when I was studying Sefer HaYetzirah that we talked about before, the Book
Right.
of Creation, right? Is it, is the ways in which this, can lead, where the way in which the one can lead to the other.
Yeah.
Um, and in Jewish tradition, the um, the study of Kabbalah and learning the letters in that deeper way, is reserved for people who have reached a certain level of maturity and learning.
Yes, absolutely.
Um, because, and I think there are ways in which sometimes that feels like patriarchal or um, exclusive, and other ways in which it feels fully appropriate.
Hmm.
That if we are exposed to, um, if we are taught ways to manipulate language,
Yes.
and we don't have the emotional maturity or the worldliness, like like broader knowledge of the
Hmm.
world and history and science and all the other things that we would maybe include in what we would hope a learned person would know, which today is maybe not as obvious
Questionable. Yeah.
as it used to be. Um, but um, but that kind of language manipulation can become kind of dark and dangerous if you're
Sure.
not, if you don't have that kind of a maturity and educational
Yeah,
background.
I mean, think
It
about
makes
incantations
sense.
and think about a golem. You need to put three letters on the forehead of a golem, Aleph, Mem, Tav,
Yeah.
and spelling Emet. The letters themselves have power in
Mm.
that story. And erasing the Aleph is what, destroys the golem. This also reminds me of the handful of our colleagues, and maybe of the generation before us of rabbis in the Reform
Mm.
movement who did not do a hakafah. They did not do the parade with the Torah
Mm.
before the reading of the Torah, or did not do Hagbah, lifting up the Torah so people could see it
Mm.
because they felt it was idolatrous.
Oh yeah.
And, by kissing the Torah rather than venerating the words and the teachings that were God's,
Mm.
like was seen as idolatrous, that
Right.
worshiping the Torah in that way is
Right.
not right. And I remember one of our professors at HUC, I'm trying to remember who it was. It might have been Lenny Kravitz, um, who, instead of kissing the Torah, would take his talit and touch it to the cheek of the person who was carrying it.
Oh, I think
Yeah,
that was Lenny Kravitz.
I think so.
Yeah.
So that we weren't idolizing the Torah, but we were, honoring the person who was holding it.
Right.
So,
I love it.
we get so scared of idolatry.
Oh, I'm gonna try to think about that more often when, as a short rabbi, one of the things that happens to me during Hakafa is that people like pat me.
Oh,
As I, like when I was growing up and the Hakafa happened and the rabbi would walk behind the Torah, people would shake the rabbi's hand. But
of
of course,
course.
then the rabbi was a tall man, and it would be like, yes, rabbi, Shabbat shalom, yes, koach, all the things, right?
Yeah.
And And when I walk by, people like stroke my arm and like pet my hair. Like,
That's so interesting.
right. And it's, and it rankles me when it happens. But I'm gonna try to channel this teaching that you just reminded me of and try to take it in for what it is, which is the community wanting to connect with me
Yeah.
as their rabbi, and that they're connecting with me in a way that they are trying to connect and honor me. It's just a different way of doing it. So
Yes. Yes. I can't
um,
picture them petting an imposing male rabbi.
no, like you wouldn't like stroke the
Yeah.
like the suit, like, you know.
Yep. Or worse, the robe.
Right. No, never. Fine, I'll just put my hair in a bob and put on a robe and people will stop petting me.
There you go.
Okay. But I also am not like, I'm also not a person who's like Shabbat Shalom, Shabbat
Yes.
Shalom. Great. All right. You get what you give. Okay, so okay, do you want to pick up with the reading,
I
Mars?
sure can. The following passage from Jerusalem relates to the crux of the argument. Okay, here's the quote. We have seen how difficult it is to preserve the abstract ideas of religion among men by means of permanent signs. Images and hieroglyphics lead to superstition and idolatry, and our alphabetical script makes man too speculative. It displays the symbolic knowledge of things and their relations too openly on the surface. It spares us the effort of penetrating and searching and creates too wide a division between doctrine and life. In order to remedy these defects, the lawgiver of this nation gave the ceremonial law. So there's that phrase again.
Yeah. So it's like it feels like they're talking about the parts of Torah that they want to be more rigid.
Yeah. And there's something like we were talking about writing things down in images, in hieroglyphics, that makes us tempted towards superstition or idolatry. It reminds me of a mezuzah,
Right.
right? A mezuzah without the cloth inside, without the parchment with the
Mhm.
shema on it inside,
Mhm.
isn't a mezuzah, right?
Right.
So the words as an amulet are really important.
Hmm. Yeah, and that given what he is concerned about, what Mendelssohn was concerned about, this sort of misunderstanding, misusage,
Yeah.
idolatry of the symbols, that in order to protect the Torah from being misunderstood in that way,
Mm-hmm.
certain parts of it were written down with more clarity.
Mm-hmm.
I think it feels to me like that's what he's saying, but I could be wrong.
Hmm. Displays the symbolic knowledge of things and their relations too openly on the surface. So maybe, I don't know, the alphabet reveals too much.
It's almost like if we leave it open to too much flexibility, then it can be, right? There are ways in which, it's sort of like the parts of Torah that get written down and codified,
Mm-hmm.
are the parts where we say, like, yeah, yes, there is a level of interpretation that happens, but there's also a boundary to that.
Mm-hmm.
And when we get nervous about people crossing those boundaries wherever we've drawn them, we go back to the written text and we say, yeah, but it's written, this is what it actually says.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. And when we want to like pull somebody back from an interpretation that we feel like that we as the rabbis or we as the deciders or we as the guides, when we feel like somebody is taking an interpretation too far, we often will pull them back to what is written.
Right.
Right.
So that
And
this division between doctrine and life is not so separate, like it becomes so many stages or layers away from what the original text was.
Right. And like you can interpret and you can play and all these things, but like at the end of the day, it's written. And when we really want to understand the like the e-car, like the essence of something,
Sure, sure.
we go back to what's written.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Or
Okay.
that's the it's like the baseline, maybe.
Hmm. So in Mendelssohn's reading, the creation of the alphabetic system mitigates against the corrosive impact of superstition and idolatry, which are a necessary byproduct of the images and hieroglyphs which preceded it. Okay, so the alphabet, because it's not just symbols and images, can reduce the chances of it being used in a superstitious or idolatrous way.
Right.
So that the image of the bull itself is not idolized.
Right.
Okay. However,
right, because we don't
yeah,
have religions where people worship the letter A, but
right.
we do have ancient religions that worship the bull.
Yes, exactly.
Right. Okay.
However, alphabets bear the risk of falling prey to unmoored abstraction. The alphabetical script is not to be discarded, but it needs to be supplemented by the ceremonial script, as the performance of ritual acts is not, in his view, mired in permanence. How about I read this quote and then we might have to wrap up?
Okay.
Man's actions are transitory. There's nothing lasting, nothing enduring about them. Like hieroglyphic script could lead to idolatry through abuse or misunderstanding. But they also have the advantage over alphabetical signs of not isolating man, of not making him to be a solitary creature poring over writings and books. So reading and study create community because we have one system.
Maybe. I think part of what I feel like I'm starting to understand a little bit more about what they mean by the ceremonial law. I
Okay.
think not just the not just the laws that are written down, but actually the doing of them.
Right, right.
Like the rituals themselves and the do
Exactly.
because this is talking about action, right? And that in addition, like the words are important, the letters are important, the text is important, but it's actually the action, the doing, which can't like the letters, the text can be manipulated, but the actions can't be.
Right.
Like you either light the candles or you don't,
Ah,
right? Um, and no matter how you understand it, interpret it, explain it, manipulate it, all this stuff, at the end of the day, if you're doing the mitzvah, you're doing the mitzvah,
right.
right? So it's so that there is this relationship between words and actions that's also coming through.
Hmm. Oh, there's
Which
so much to pick
yeah,
through.
maybe it's a good place to stop and pick up there next time.
Yeah, and
But
then we'll finish the
we
introduction.
almost made it through the introduction.
I think we've said that every time.
Right now. It just keeps going.
Ah,
But it's been fascinating.
it really is. This is a great introduction. Like as its own work, this is so
Yeah.
fascinating.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, what
Okay.
are your takeaways? Do you have any thoughts you're gonna think about today?
Mm, I think I'm interested to think a little bit more about this idea of like Moses at Mount Sinai and the relationship between the development of language and the development of written language and the development of Torah, or the development of the alphabet and the development of Torah.
Mm-hmm.
And also, I would like to look into this term ceremonial law and see if we've understood it correctly or
Or
yeah, or
perhaps not.
not.
Yeah, yeah. I'm wondering if it refers to the mitzvot that are. I mean, most of them you do it right. You do Judaism. The deed is important. The action is important, and how and why we do it really, I think, distinguishes us from other religious um, backgrounds and practices,
Yeah.
um, and takes you away from the letters themselves. Because, as you and I were talking about, it's something that's taught.
Hmm.
right? The instructor is using language, spoken language to teach it.
Right.
Um, hmm.
Okay. Lots
All
to think
right.
about.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Goodbye.
Bye.